In this screencast, we're going to go over some of the basics of the coding form. If you're watching this screencast, you should already be familiar with how to either import or capture a movie into a Gamebreaker project, as well as be familiar with either controlling the movie with the floating movie controls or the shortcut keys on the keyboard. So the coding form is this area in the top right of the project window. And the first thing you want to become familiar with in the coding form is what mode you're in. You're either in design mode, which we are now because you can see it's selected and blue here, or you're in code mode, which we're not because it's unselected and gray just to the left. So in the middle of the coding form, when you first open a project window, it gives you some pretty simple directions. Use these three buttons, which are located here, just above the coding form, to create a new form or import an existing form. Since this is a brand new project and we don't have any forms created already, then we can just follow the directions and single click on this event button here, and that adds an event to the coding form. So notice when the event button gets added, the name of it's highlighted or selected already. So I could just give it a name and start typing right away. For example, maybe something I'm looking for is Duke offense, and maybe something else I'm looking for, if I add another event button, is Duke defense. Maybe I'll just do one more. I'm going to look for Duke field goal attempts. So anytime you're adding new buttons, naming the buttons, or changing any of the other properties that we'll go over in other screencasts, that's when you're in design mode on the coding form, because you're designing the form. Now if I'm actually ready to code the movie, I'll just single click on the button here to flip into code mode, and you'll see the movie start playing right away, which lets you know that you're in code mode and the movie's kind of linked to the coding form. I just press the space bar in order to pause the movie here. Now I can use these buttons to mark the beginning and end of any events that I'm looking for. So in this case, Duke got the tip, and I'll single click on this button to mark the beginning of this Duke offensive possession. You can see that when I do that, you get a nice little concentric circle design on the Duke offense button to let you know that you've marked in or the beginning of that event. Also, when I do that, you can see down on the timeline, a Duke offensive row gets added to the timeline right away. So now I can play the movie again with the space bar, and you can see an instance starting to build in the row on the timeline. And at the end of the possession here, I'll pause it again in order to mark out or mark the end of the event. And now Duke's going to start on defense. So I'll single click there, and you can see the Duke defensive row has been added to the timeline. I get this nice concentric circle design on the defensive button. Press the space bar again to start playing. And you don't have to pause the movie in order to mark in or out. For example, here's the end of the possession, and I'll just click on the button while the movie's playing. And now you can see that we have two rows with one instance in each row. So the basic idea is that one event button corresponds to the same named row in the timeline, and the more events that you code, they will drop into the timeline from left to right. So if we go a little further here, and Duke's on defense, I'll click that button to mark the beginning of the possession, and then we can let it play here. Now, the nice thing about coding is that once you've marked in, let me pause it with a space bar, the project window is just going to remember where you've marked in. So if I wanted to watch something that's already happened, I can actually just rewind here, and you can see the instance shrinking there, but it just remembers where you've marked in. So I can play, rewind, I can even fast forward right to the end of the possession if I want. There's 2 times speed, I can go to 4 times speed. Oh, I went a little too far. Instead of having to mark out here, it's no problem. I can just rewind back to the point where I want, play it there, and then I'll mark out with defense. Now you can see we have 2 instances in the Duke defensive row, and I'll let it keep playing here. So the last thing we'll go over is, now that Duke's on offense, you can mark a number of different events concurrently that are happening. So for example, the Duke offensive possession started a few seconds ago, but let me rewind by using the left arrow key here because I also want to get this Duke FGA that happened. So I have one event that's already started. I can single click on a second, and now I have two events that are happening concurrently. They started at different times. Now I'll press the space bar to play. There's the end of the possession. Now I can end both of those. And so the point is you can have as many different events happening at the same time as you want. And now down on the timeline you can see we have these two instances that are overlapping because they happened at the same time. One other nice feature to know about when you're coding is that once you've marked in, for example, let me mark in with the Duke defense here and then play. Once you've marked in, you can see the instance starting to build there. I could just click and drag the playhead itself and you can see the instance grow or shrink accordingly. So I could just get right to the end of the possession here. And when the ball turns over, I could just single click on the button to mark the end. So I hope that gives you a good understanding of some of the basics of coding. Please tune in to other screencasts to see more information regarding the characteristics and properties of the event buttons and other types of buttons in the coding form. Thanks for watching.